Lisa had always loved the sound of gravel crunching under truck tires in the early morning. It meant another day was starting at her ranch, another day of doing what she loved most, training police officers and their four-legged partners. The 15 acres of rolling hills had been in her family for 3 generations. Her grandfather built the original farmhouse back in 1952, and her father had added the barn where she now kept her training equipment. But these days, the sound of gravel wasn't the only thing she heard in the mornings. There was also the distant hum of construction crews and the occasional honk of moving trucks. The Meadowbrook Estates development had been growing around her property for the past 2 years, and what started as a few scattered houses had turned into a full-blown luxury neighborhood. Lisa didn't mind the new neighbors at first. In fact, she thought it might be nice to have more people around. Her ranch sat on what used to be the edge of nowhere, where the closest neighbor was old Pete Morrison, who lived half a mile down the dirt road with his 3 horses and a stubborn mule named Fred. Pete had moved to Florida last year to live with his daughter, and his property was now home to a massive 2-story house with more windows than Lisa could count. The irony wasn't lost on her that she was training the very people who would be protecting these new million-dollar homes. Every week, police officers from 3 different counties came to her facility to practice everything from basic obedience training with their K-9 partners to complex tactical scenarios. She had obstacle courses, mock buildings for search training, and even a small indoor facility for when the weather turned bad. Lisa took pride in her work. She'd been doing it for 8 years now, ever since she retired from the police force herself. A knee injury during a foot chase had ended her patrol days, but it opened up a new chapter that she found even more rewarding. There was something special about watching a young officer bond with their new partner, or seeing a veteran cop finally master a technique they'd been struggling with. The training facility had grown organically over the years. What started as Lisa helping out a few friends from her old department had turned into a legitimate business with clients from across the state. She had proper insurance, all the necessary permits, and even a small waiting list of departments wanting to book training sessions. Everything changed when the Meadowbrook Estates Homeowners Association was officially formed 6 months ago. Lisa received a thick envelope in the mail one Tuesday afternoon, filled with papers she didn't understand and rules she'd never agreed to follow. According to the documents, her property had somehow been included in the HOA boundaries due to some kind of zoning change that happened while the development was being built. At first, Lisa thought it was a mistake. She called the number on the letterhead and spoke to a woman named Patricia, who assured her that yes, her property was indeed part of the HOA now, and yes, she would need to comply with all community standards and regulations. When Lisa explained that her ranch had been there long before any of these houses existed, Patricia simply said that the HOA would work with her to bring the property into compliance. Lisa didn't like the sound of that, but she figured she could handle whatever minor adjustments they wanted. Maybe they'd ask her to paint her fence a certain color or plant some flowers by the mailbox. She'd been getting along fine with her actual neighbors, the ones who lived close enough to wave when they drove by. Most of them seemed genuinely interested in what she did for a living and thought it was pretty cool to have a police training facility in the neighborhood. But Patricia wasn't the one calling the shots. That honor belonged to Beverly Hartwell, a woman who had moved into the largest house in the development and immediately appointed herself as the HOA president. Beverly had made her money in commercial real estate back in Chicago and had very specific ideas about what a proper neighborhood should look like. Lisa first met Beverly at a community barbecue that one of her neighbors organized in the park area of the development. It was meant to be a friendly get-together, where old and new residents could meet each other. Lisa brought her famous potato salad and was looking forward to putting faces to names. Beverly stood out immediately. She was the kind of woman who looked like she'd never had a hair out of place in her entire life, wearing a crisp white blouse and pearls to an outdoor barbecue. She spent most of the evening walking around with a clipboard, taking notes about various issues she noticed around the neighborhood. When someone introduced Lisa as the woman who ran the police training facility, Beverly's smile became tight and forced. She asked a lot of questions about Lisa's business: how many people came and went, what kind of vehicles they drove, whether there was noise, and what those structures were that she could see from her back deck. Lisa answered honestly, yes, police cars came and went during business hours, Yes, there was some noise during training, but only during reasonable daytime hours. And yes, those structures were training obstacles. Things like climbing walls, tunnels, and platforms that dogs and officers used for practice. Beverly nodded and smiled, but Lisa could tell she wasn't happy about any of it. The conversation ended with Beverly saying she'd like to learn more about the facility sometime and perhaps discuss ways to make it more compatible with neighborhood aesthetics. Lisa left the barbecue feeling uneasy. She'd been in law enforcement long enough to recognize when someone was sizing up a situation, looking for problems. Beverly had that same calculating look that suspects got when they were planning their next move. Sure enough, the first violation notice arrived in Lisa's mailbox 3 days later. It was for non-conforming structures visible from neighboring properties. The letter explained that the HOA Architectural Committee had determined that her training obstacles were not in keeping with the residential character of the neighborhood and would need to be removed or relocated. Within 30 days, Lisa read the notice twice, then called her lawyer. She'd been careful to make sure all her permits and licenses were in order when she started the business, and she was pretty sure an HOA couldn't just override her legal right to operate. Her lawyer confirmed this, explaining that her business predated the HOA and should be protected under grandfather clause provisions. But Beverly wasn't the type to give up easily. When Lisa didn't respond to the first violation notice, a second one arrived, this time with a longer list of complaints. Her business sign was too large. Her gravel driveway was inappropriate for a residential area. The parking area for visiting police vehicles was an eyesore. Each notice came with threats of daily fines and legal action if Lisa didn't comply immediately. The amount started small, $50 a day, but quickly escalated to hundreds of dollars for each alleged violation. Lisa tried to handle things diplomatically at first. She attended the next HOA meeting and calmly explained her situation to the board. She brought copies of her permits and business license, along with letters of recommendation from the police departments she worked with. She even offered to install some screening plants around her training area if it would help address their concerns about aesthetics. Most of the board members seemed reasonable. They asked good questions and appeared to understand that Lisa's business was both legal and beneficial to the community. But Beverly dominated the conversation, repeatedly interrupting Lisa and steering the discussion back to property values and neighborhood standards. The meeting ended with the board agreeing to table the issue pending further review, but Lisa could see that Beverly was already working on the newer residents, planting seeds of doubt about having a commercial operation in their residential paradise. Walking back to her truck that night, Lisa realized that this was going to be more complicated than she'd hoped. Beverly wasn't interested in compromise or coexistence. She wanted Lisa gone, and she was going to use every tool at her disposal to make that happen. Lisa sat in her truck for a few minutes before starting the engine, looking at the lights in the houses around her. Most of these people seemed decent enough, but they'd invested their life savings in their dream homes. If Beverly could convince them that Lisa's ranch was hurting their property values, they might start seeing her as the enemy too. She drove home slowly, already planning her next move. Tomorrow she'd call her lawyer again and start documenting everything. If Beverly wanted a fight, Lisa was ready to give her one. After all, she'd spent years training people to handle much more dangerous situations than an overzealous HOA president. What Beverly didn't know yet was that Lisa wasn't just some random rancher who could be intimidated into backing down. She was someone who understood tactics, strategy, and the importance of knowing your opponent, and she had resources that Beverly couldn't even imagine. The harassment started small, the way these things usually do. Beverly began with what she called friendly reminders about HOA compliance. These arrived in Lisa's mailbox every few days, each one typed on official HOA letterhead and signed with Beverly's elaborate signature. The first reminder was about Lisa's mailbox. According to Beverly, it needed to be replaced with an approved model that matched the neighborhood aesthetic. The current mailbox, a sturdy black metal box that had served the family for 20 years, was apparently inconsistent with community standards. Lisa almost laughed when she read it. Her mailbox sat at the end of a quarter-mile driveway, barely visible from the main road. But she decided to pick her battles carefully and ordered a new mailbox from the approved vendor list. It cost 3 times as much as a regular mailbox and took 6 weeks to arrive. but Lisa figured it was a small price to pay for peace. Beverly wasn't satisfied with just the mailbox victory. The next reminder focused on Lisa's fence line. The split-rail wooden fence that bordered the main road was apparently in violation of HOA standards because it wasn't painted white. Never mind that it was a classic ranch-style fence that had been there since before Beverly was born. According to the community covenants, all fencing visible from public areas needed to be white. Lisa's lawyer advised her to ignore this one. The fence predated the HOA by decades, and forcing her to change it would likely violate local historic preservation guidelines. But Beverly didn't let it go. She began driving by Lisa's property twice a day, always slowing down to take pictures with her phone. The real escalation began when Beverly started attending Lisa's training sessions. Not officially, of course. She would park her silver Mercedes on the public road just outside Lisa's property line and sit there for hours, watching everything through expensive binoculars. At first, Lisa tried to ignore her. Police officers who came for training would ask about the woman in the fancy car, and Lisa would just shrug and say it was a neighbor. But Beverly's presence was becoming disruptive. Officers felt uncomfortable being watched and photographed during their training, especially when they were practicing tactical scenarios. One particularly awkward day, Beverly actually got out of her car and tried to engage with Officers Johnson and Williams while they were taking a lunch break. She peppered them with questions about noise levels, environmental impact, and whether they'd noticed any safety concerns about the facility. Both officers were polite, but clearly uncomfortable. When Beverly asked if they thought a residential neighborhood was an appropriate place for this type of activity, Officer Johnson simply said that Lisa ran one of the best training facilities in the state and that her work made them all better at protecting the community. Beverly didn't like that answer. She made a few notes on her clipboard and returned to her car. But Lisa could see her making phone calls for the next hour. The phone calls, as it turned out, were to the county zoning office, the state environmental agency, and the local animal control department. Beverly had decided that if she couldn't use HOA rules to shut down Lisa's business, she'd find other ways. The first official visit came from a zoning inspector who looked genuinely confused about why he was there. He walked around Lisa's property, checked her permits, and confirmed that everything was in perfect order. When Lisa asked what prompted the inspection, he mentioned an anonymous complaint about commercial activities in a residential zone. Lisa knew exactly who had made that complaint, but the inspector couldn't say for sure. He apologized for the inconvenience and left, but warned Lisa that additional complaints could trigger more frequent inspections. The environmental inspector came next, responding to concerns about potential groundwater, contamination from dog waste, and chemical runoff. This inspector was less friendly and spent 3 hours taking soil and water samples from around Lisa's property. The tests came back clean, of course, but the whole process cost Lisa a full day of canceled training sessions. Animal control showed up twice in 1 week, investigating reports of aggressive dogs being trained for attack purposes and inadequate animal housing conditions. Both complaints were obviously frivolous to anyone who understood police. Cane training, but the officers still had to complete their investigations. Lisa started keeping a detailed log of every complaint, every inspection, and every interaction with Beverly. Her lawyer suggested that this pattern of harassment might eventually be useful if they needed to take legal action. But Beverly was just getting started. She began showing up at every HOA board meeting with increasingly elaborate presentations about the commercial intrusion in their residential community. She created PowerPoint slides with photos of police cars in Lisa's driveway, charts showing property value impacts, and even a petition signed by concerned residents. The petition was a masterpiece of manipulation. Beverly had gone door to door in the newest section of the development, where people were still getting settled and didn't really know Lisa personally. She framed the issue as a choice between maintaining their property values and allowing their neighborhood to become a commercial zone. She never mentioned that Lisa's business helped train the officers who kept their families safe. She didn't talk about the fact that the facility was professionally run and fully licensed. Instead, she focused on abstract concepts like residential, character, and community standards. Some residents bought into Beverly's narrative completely, Mrs. Chen. from Maple Street started driving a different route to avoid passing Lisa's property, claiming the sight of police cars made her nervous. Mr. Patterson from Oak Avenue complained to anyone who would listen about the constant noise from dog training, even though the facility was nearly a mile from his house. But Beverly's campaign also backfired in some unexpected ways. Several residents made the effort to actually drive by Lisa's property and see what all the fuss was about. Many were surprised to discover that the ranch looked nothing like the dangerous commercial operation Beverly had described. Tom and Rita Valdez, who lived just 3 houses down from the main entrance, stopped by one afternoon to introduce themselves properly. They'd heard about the controversy and wanted to see the facility for themselves. Lisa gave them a tour, explaining how the training worked and showing them some of the specialized equipment. The Valdez family was impressed. Their teenage son David was interested in law enforcement as a career, and Lisa offered to let him volunteer at the facility to get some experience. Within a week, David was helping with basic dog care and learning about canine training from the ground up. Word spread quietly through the neighborhood that Lisa was actually pretty great to have around. When Mrs. Rodriguez's house was broken into while she was visiting her daughter, it was Lisa who coordinated with the responding officers and helped comfort the family while the police processed the scene. Beverly noticed that her support was becoming less solid, so she doubled down on her tactics. She started attending city council meetings demanding that they review Lisa's business license. She filed complaints with the Better Business Bureau and even tried to contact the accreditation board for law enforcement training facilities. Each new complaint required Lisa to spend time responding, providing documentation, and often scheduling meetings with various officials. It was becoming a part-time job just to defend her right to operate her business. The breaking point came during a particularly heated HOA meeting in July. Beverly had invited a property values expert to speak about the negative impact of commercial operations in residential areas. The expert gave a slick presentation with charts and graphs showing how property values declined when neighborhoods lost their residential character. Lisa sat in the back of the room, listening to this consultant talk about her business like it was a toxic waste dump. When the presentation ended, she asked if she could respond. Beverly tried to shut her down, claiming that the meeting agenda didn't include time for commercial operators to speak. But several board members, including the vice president, insisted that Lisa should have a chance to address the concerns. Lisa stood up and calmly explained what her business actually did. She talked about Officer Martinez, who credited his canine training at her facility with helping him find a missing child last year. She mentioned Detective Thompson, whose drug detection dog had been trained at the ranch and had since made dozens of arrests that kept drugs out of local schools. She explained that police departments from 3 counties sent officers to her facility because the training was that good. She noted that crime rates in their area had actually decreased since more departments started using her training programs. When Lisa finished speaking, the room was quiet. Even some of Beverly's strongest supporters seemed to be reconsidering their position. Beverly was furious. She accused Lisa of emotional manipulation and demanded that the board focus on property values rather than irrelevant sob stories about police work. That comment didn't go over well with residents who had family members in law enforcement. Mr. Stevens, whose son was a state trooper, stood up and said he was proud to live near a facility that made officers safer and more effective. The meeting ended with the board agreeing to delay any action pending further legal review. Beverly stormed out, but not before announcing that she would be exploring all available options to resolve the situation. Lisa knew that meant the real fight was just beginning. Beverly had shown that she was willing to use any tactic, no matter how frivolous or disruptive, to get what she wanted. She had resources, connections, and apparently unlimited time to pursue her crusade. But Lisa had something Beverly didn't expect: the support of people who actually understood what she did for a living. And if Beverly wanted to escalate things further, she was about to discover that taking on someone who trained police officers for a living was a bigger challenge than she'd bargained for. The next morning, Lisa found a new violation notice in her mailbox. This one was different from the others. Instead of complaints about aesthetics or property values, it was an ultimatum. Beverly was demanding that Lisa cease all commercial operations within 72 hours, or face immediate legal action and daily fines of $500. Lisa read the notice twice, then walked back to her house to make a phone call. It was time to remind Beverly that some fights weren't worth picking. Tuesday morning started like any other day for Lisa. She was up at 6, feeding the 3 German shepherds that lived on the property year-round, checking the training equipment, and reviewing the schedule for the day's sessions. 2 K-9 units from the county sheriff's department were coming at 9 for scent detection practice, followed by a tactical training session with the city police SWAT team in the afternoon. Lisa was setting up the obstacle course when she heard the crunch of gravel that meant someone was coming up her driveway. But this wasn't the familiar sound of police cruisers or the pickup trucks that most officers drove to training. This was different. Multiple vehicles moving slowly like a procession. She looked up to see Beverly's silver Mercedes leading a convoy of 3 other luxury cars up the winding drive toward her house. Lisa recognized the vehicles from previous HOA meetings. Beverly had brought backup. The cars parked in a neat line in front of Lisa's farmhouse, and 4 people emerged like they were about to conduct a military operation. Beverly led the group, carrying a thick folder and wearing what looked like her most expensive business suit. Following behind her were 3 other HOA board members: Patricia, the secretary who had first told Lisa about the HOA inclusion; Robert, the treasurer who seemed to go along with whatever Beverly said; and surprisingly, Helen, the vice president who had usually been more reasonable during meetings. Lisa wiped her hands on her work gloves and walked over to meet them. She kept her voice calm and professional, though she could feel her heart rate increasing. After months of harassment, she recognized this as an escalation. "Good morning," Lisa said. "What can I do for you folks?" Beverly didn't bother with pleasantries. She opened her folder and pulled out several sheets of paper, holding them up like she was serving a legal document. "Lisa, the HOA board has completed its review of your commercial operation, and we've reached a final decision. This property is in clear violation of multiple community covenants, zoning restrictions, and neighborhood standards." Lisa glanced at the other board members. Patricia looked uncomfortable, avoiding eye contact. Robert was checking his phone like he wanted to be anywhere else. But Helen was nodding along with Beverly's words, which surprised Lisa. Helen had seemed more reasonable during the meetings. "As you can see in these documents," Beverly continued, waving the papers, "we've documented numerous violations over the past several months. Unauthorized commercial signage, non-conforming structures, excessive traffic, noise disturbances, and incompatible land use." Lisa had heard these complaints before, but Beverly's tone was different today. More formal, more final. This wasn't another violation notice. This was something bigger. "The board has voted to implement an emergency resolution under Section 12.3 of the Community Covenants," Beverly announced. "You have 72 hours to cease all commercial activities on this property and remove all non-residential structures. Failure to comply will result in immediate legal action and daily fines of $500. Lisa felt her temper rising but kept her voice steady. "Beverly, we've been through this before. This business was here long before your HOA existed. I have grandfather clause protection under state law, and my business license is completely valid." Beverly's smile was cold and calculating. "That's where you're wrong. Our legal counsel has reviewed the situation thoroughly. When this property was included in the HOA boundaries, you became subject to all existing covenants and restrictions. The fact that your business predates the HOA doesn't give you unlimited rights to violate community standards." Lisa looked more carefully at the papers Beverly was holding. They looked official, with legal letterhead and formal language. Beverly had clearly invested serious money in trying to build a case. "Your business might have been acceptable in a rural area," Beverly continued, "but this is now a residential community with standards to maintain. Our property values depend on maintaining the residential character of the neighborhood." Patricia finally spoke up, her voice quiet and nervous. "Lisa, maybe we could work out some kind of compromise. Perhaps reduce the number of training sessions or limit them to certain days." Beverly shot Patricia a sharp look that could have cut glass. "There's no compromise here, Patricia. Either this is a residential neighborhood or it's a commercial zone. We can't have it both ways." Lisa took a deep breath, trying to stay professional. "I understand your concerns about property values, but have you considered that having a police training facility actually makes this neighborhood safer? The officers I train patrol these streets. They respond to calls in this area." "That's irrelevant," Beverly snapped. Safety is the responsibility of the police department, not individual property owners. You don't get to run a business in a residential area just because you think it serves some public good. Robert finally looked up from his phone. The fines start accumulating immediately if you don't comply within 72 hours. That's $500 per day every day until all commercial activities cease. Lisa did some quick math in her head. At $500 a day, Beverly was threatening to bankrupt her if she didn't shut down her life's work. And lawsuits, even frivolous ones, could cost tens of thousands of dollars to defend. "This is harassment," Lisa said, her voice getting harder. "You've been filing false complaints with county agencies, disrupting my business operations, and now you're trying to force me out with threats of financial ruin." Beverly's eyes lit up like she'd been waiting for Lisa to lose her temper. "Harassment? I'm simply enforcing community standards that every other resident manages to follow without a problem. If you can't operate within the rules, perhaps you should consider relocating to a property that's properly zoned for commercial use." Helen stepped forward for the first time, and Lisa could see that she was nervous but determined. "Lisa, we're not trying to hurt you personally, but we have a responsibility to all the residents in this community. When people buy homes here, they expect a certain quality of life. Quality of life that includes being safe from crime," Lisa pointed out. "Which is exactly what my facility helps provide." Beverly waved her hand dismissively. "The police can train somewhere else. There are plenty of commercial areas where this type of operation would be appropriate. You don't need to do it in the middle of a residential neighborhood." Lisa felt her patience finally reaching its limit. "Beverly, this isn't the middle of anything. My family has owned this land for 70 years. We were here first. You built your development around us, not the other way around." "That's ancient history," Beverly replied. "What matters now is the current zoning and the HOA covenants that every property owner in this area is bound by. Your personal attachment to this land doesn't override community standards." The conversation was going in circles, and Lisa could see that Beverly had no intention of backing down. The other board members were clearly uncomfortable with the confrontation, but they weren't willing to stand up to Beverly's strong-arm tactics. "I need time to review these documents with my attorney," Lisa said finally. Beverly's smile returned, but it wasn't friendly. "Of course. You have 72 hours to make your decision. After that, the fines begin, and we'll be forced to pursue legal remedies." Lisa was about to respond when Beverly suddenly changed direction entirely. Her voice got louder and more aggressive, like she was performing for an invisible audience. "Actually, you know what? I'm tired of this. I'm tired of trying to reason with someone who clearly has no respect for this community or the people who live here." Beverly pulled out her phone and started scrolling through her contacts. 72 hours is too generous. "This commercial operation is disrupting our neighborhood right now, today. The noise, the traffic, the constant stream of police vehicles, it's affecting everyone's quality of life." Lisa watched in disbelief as Beverly's demeanor completely shifted. The businesslike presentation was gone, replaced by what looked like genuine anger. "I'm changing the timeline," Beverly announced. "You have 30 minutes to begin shutting down operations, or I'm calling the police to report an illegal commercial operation and trespassing." Patricia looked shocked. "Beverly, that's not what we discussed. The board agreed on 72 hours. The board gave me authority to handle this situation," Beverly snapped back. "And I've decided that 30 minutes is more than sufficient for someone who's been in violation for months." Robert and Helen exchanged glances but didn't say anything. Lisa realized that Beverly had planned this escalation all along. The 72-hour timeline was just theater. She'd always intended to force an immediate confrontation. "Beverly, you can't just change the rules in the middle of a conversation," Lisa said. "That's not how any of this works." But Beverly was already dialing a number on her phone. Her face flushed with what looked like righteous anger. "This is Beverly Hartwell, president of the Meadowbrook Estates HOA. I need to report an illegal commercial operation in our residential neighborhood. The operator is refusing to comply with community standards and is currently trespassing on property that's subject to HOA covenants." Lisa watched in amazement as Beverly continued her performance for the emergency dispatcher. She was describing Lisa's legitimate business as if it were some kind of criminal operation, using phrases like dangerous activities and threat to community safety. The other board members looked increasingly uncomfortable, but none of them tried to stop Beverly or correct her statements to the dispatcher. Lisa realized that Beverly had finally overplayed her hand. For months, she'd been careful to stay within legal boundaries, using proper procedures and filing complaints through official channels. But this phone call was different. This was Beverly filing a false police report, and she was doing it in front of witnesses. As Beverly continued describing the emergency situation to the dispatcher, Lisa quietly pulled out her own phone and hit record. She had a feeling that what happened next was going to be very interesting indeed. After all, Beverly had no idea who was about to respond to her emergency call. Lisa stood quietly on her front porch, watching Beverly pace back and forth while she spoke to the emergency dispatcher. The other HOA board members had retreated to their cars, clearly uncomfortable with how quickly the situation had escalated from a formal business meeting to an emergency police call. "Yes, that's correct," Beverly was saying into her phone, her voice getting louder and more dramatic with each sentence. "This is an ongoing commercial operation in a residential neighborhood. The operator is refusing to cease illegal activities and is currently in violation of multiple community ordinances." Lisa almost felt sorry for the dispatcher, who was probably trying to figure out what kind of emergency this actually was. Beverly was using phrases like immediate, threat to community safety, and dangerous commercial activities, making it sound like Lisa was running some kind of illegal weapons factory instead of a police training facility. "The address is 1247 Meadowbrook Lane," Beverly continued. "Please send officers immediately. The property owner is being hostile and uncooperative." Lisa raised an eyebrow at that description. She'd been nothing but calm and professional throughout the entire confrontation. But apparently Beverly was rewriting history for the police report. After Beverly hung up, she turned to Lisa with a triumphant expression. "The police will be here within 10 minutes. I suggest you use that time to gather any personal belongings you want to take with you, because you won't be allowed back on this property until you're in full compliance with HOA regulations." Lisa almost laughed. Beverly clearly had no idea how police responses actually worked, or what officers could and couldn't do in a situation like this. She also had no idea that 1247 Meadowbrook Lane was one of the most familiar addresses in the county to local law enforcement. "Beverly," Lisa said calmly, "I think you might want to reconsider what you just did." "There's nothing to reconsider," Beverly shot back. "I gave you every opportunity to handle this reasonably, but you chose to be difficult. Now the authorities can deal with you." Patricia finally got out of her car and approached them. "Beverly, maybe we should wait for our attorney before involving the police. This seems like it might be getting out of hand." Beverly turned on Patricia like a snake. "Patricia, I told you that I would handle this situation, and that's exactly what I'm doing. The board gave me authority to take whatever steps necessary to resolve this violation." Helen and Robert remained in their vehicles, both of them looking like they wanted to be anywhere else. Lisa could see Helen on her phone, probably trying to reach someone for advice about what to do when your HOA president starts filing police reports. In the distance, Lisa could hear the faint sound of sirens getting closer. Beverly heard them too and smiled with satisfaction. "I hope you have a good lawyer," Beverly said, "because after today you're going to need one." Lisa checked her phone to make sure it was still recording. "I think we both might be surprised by how this turns out." The first police car came up the driveway at a reasonable speed. No emergency lights or sirens. Lisa recognized the vehicle immediately. It was Officer Danny Rodriguez's unit. Danny had been coming to her facility for K-9 training for 3 years, and his German Shepherd partner, Max, had learned basic detection work right here on this property. Beverly straightened her jacket and walked toward the police car, with the confident stride of someone who believed she was about to be vindicated. The other board members finally got out of their cars, probably figuring they needed to be present for whatever was about to happen. Officer Rodriguez stepped out of his car and immediately looked confused. He glanced around the familiar property, then at the group of well-dressed people standing near Lisa's front porch. Lisa could see the exact moment when he recognized where he was. "Sergeant Mitchell," Danny called out, using Lisa's old rank from her police days. "Everything okay here?" Beverly's confident expression faltered slightly, but she quickly recovered and marched over to Officer Rodriguez. "Officer, I'm Beverly Hartwell, president of the Meadowbrook Estates Homeowners Association. I'm the one who called about the illegal commercial operation on this property. Danny looked even more confused. He glanced back at Lisa, who gave him a small wave from the porch. Ma'am, I'm not sure I understand. This is a licensed police training facility. I've been here dozens of times for K-9 training. Beverly's face started to turn red. That's exactly the problem. This is a residential neighborhood, not a place for commercial police activities. This woman is operating an illegal business in violation of community standards. A second police car was coming up the driveway, followed by what looked like a third vehicle. Word was apparently spreading on the police radio that something was happening at Lisa's place. Officer Chen stepped out of the second car, and Lisa recognized her immediately. Rachel Chen had brought her new K-9 partner here just last week for basic obedience training. She looked around the scene with the same confused expression as Danny. "Hey, Lisa," Rachel called out. Danny radioed that there was some kind of problem here. Beverly stepped between the officers and Lisa, clearly frustrated that they were treating Lisa like a friend instead of a criminal. "Officers, I don't think you understand the situation. This woman is operating a commercial business in a residential area without proper permits. She's been cited multiple times by the HOA for violations, and she's refused to comply with community standards." Danny and Rachel exchanged glances. Lisa could see them trying to figure out how to handle a situation where someone was filing complaints about a facility that the police department officially used for training. "Ma'am," Danny said carefully, "I'm not sure the HOA has authority over a licensed business that predates the HOA itself. And this facility provides training services to multiple law enforcement agencies in the region." Beverly was getting angrier by the minute. "I don't care what services she provides. This is a residential neighborhood with property values to protect. Commercial operations are not permitted under any circumstances." That's when the third vehicle arrived and Lisa had to suppress a grin. It was Sergeant Mike Torres from the County Sheriff's Department, driving an unmarked car. Mike had been coming to Lisa's facility for advanced tactical training for 5 years, and he'd brought dozens of other officers for specialized courses. Mike got out of his car and surveyed the scene with the calm assessment of a veteran officer. He nodded to Danny and Rachel, then looked over at Lisa. "Someone want to tell me what's going on here?" Mike asked. Beverly stepped forward again, clearly determined to control the narrative. "Sergeant, I'm the HOA president for this community, and I've been trying to resolve a serious violation issue with this property owner. She's been operating an illegal commercial business and refuses to comply with community standards." Mike looked around at the familiar training equipment, the professional signage, and the well-maintained facility. "Illegal business? This is Sergeant Mitchell's training facility. Half my department has been through courses here." Beverly's confidence was starting to crack. "Your department shouldn't be using residential properties for commercial training. There are proper facilities for that kind of activity." "Ma'am," Mike said patiently, "this is a proper facility. It's licensed, insured, and accredited. Some of the best K-9 training in the state happens right here." More vehicles were arriving now. Word had definitely spread on the radio that officers were responding to Lisa's address, and several off-duty personnel were showing up to see what was happening. Lisa recognized at least 6 different officers from various departments, some still in uniform and others in civilian clothes. Officer Martinez arrived with his K-9 partner, a Belgian Malinois named Storm, who immediately started wagging his tail when he saw Lisa. Martinez looked around at the crowd and grinned. "Are we having a surprise training session?" he asked. "Nobody told me we were doing a group exercise today." Beverly was starting to look panicked. This was clearly not how she'd expected her police call to go. Instead of arresting Lisa, the officers were treating this like a social gathering. Detective Williams pulled up in her personal truck, followed by Officer Johnson in his patrol unit. Both of them had been at Lisa's facility just last month for a specialized tracking course. "What's the party for?" Detective Williams asked, walking over to join the group. Danny Rodriguez finally took control of the situation. "Ma'am," he said to Beverly, "I think there might be some confusion here about what constitutes an illegal operation. Sergeant Mitchell runs a legitimate business that provides valuable training services to law enforcement. Her facility is properly licensed and has been operating here for years." Beverly's voice was getting shrill. "I don't care how long it's been operating. This is a residential neighborhood now, and commercial activities are prohibited under HOA covenants." Sergeant Torres stepped forward. "Ma'am, I need to ask you something. When you called 911, Did you tell the dispatcher that this was an emergency situation requiring immediate police response? Beverly hesitated. Well, yes. This woman was refusing to comply with lawful orders from the HOA. And did you describe this as a dangerous commercial operation that posed a threat to community safety? Beverly's face was getting redder. I may have mentioned safety concerns, yes. Mike nodded slowly. Ma'am, I'm going to need to speak with you about filing a false police report. What you've described to us is a civil dispute between you and a licensed business owner. Calling 911 and claiming there's an emergency when there isn't one is a misdemeanor offense. The color drained from Beverly's face. False report? I didn't file a false report. This woman is clearly in violation of community standards. Community standards enforced by an HOA are civil matters, Danny explained. They're not criminal violations, and they don't constitute emergencies that require police response. You've wasted emergency resources that could have been needed elsewhere. Patricia finally spoke up from where she'd been standing near the cars. Beverly, maybe we should call our attorney and sort this out properly. But Beverly was too far committed to back down now. These officers are clearly biased because they use this facility. I want to speak to a supervisor who isn't personally involved in this situation. Detective Williams chuckled. Ma'am, good luck finding a supervisor in this county who hasn't been through training here. Sergeant Mitchell has worked with pretty much every department in the region. Officer Chen nodded in agreement. The state police send people here too. It's one of the most respected training facilities in this part of the country. Beverly looked around at the group of officers, all of whom were clearly on Lisa's side, and seemed to realize for the first time that she might have seriously miscalculated. This is ridiculous, she said, her voice cracking slightly. Property values matter too. You can't just ignore community standards because you happen to like someone. Sergeant Torres handed Beverly a piece of paper. Ma'am, this is a citation for misuse of emergency services. You'll need to appear in court to answer the charge. Beverly stared at the citation in disbelief. You're giving me a ticket? For calling the police about an illegal business operation? For filing a false emergency report, Mike corrected. And for wasting resources that should be available for actual emergencies. The other HOA board members were clearly eager to leave. Patricia was already walking back toward her car, and Robert was pretending to be very interested in something on his phone. Lisa finally stepped down from her porch and walked over to join the group. Beverly, I tried to handle this reasonably. I offered compromises. I attended your meetings, and I explained my legal right to operate here. You chose to escalate this to false police reports and harassment. Beverly turned on Lisa with the fury of someone who realized she'd completely lost control of the situation. This isn't over. I'll find other ways to shut you down. Property values in this neighborhood depend on maintaining residential standards. Sergeant Torres shook his head. Ma'am, I strongly advise you to speak with an attorney before taking any further action. What you've been doing could constitute harassment of a business owner, and continued false reports could result in more serious charges. As the HOA board members retreated to their cars and prepared to leave, Lisa looked around at all the officers who had responded to Beverly's emergency call. It was like an impromptu reunion of everyone she'd worked with over the years. Thanks for backing me up, guys, Lisa said. Officer Martinez grinned. Are you kidding? This place is legendary. My partner Storm learned everything he knows right here. Detective Williams nodded. Half the major busts in this county have involved dogs trained at this facility. Anyone who wants to shut this place down doesn't understand what you do for public safety. As Beverly's Mercedes disappeared down the driveway, followed by the other board members' cars, Lisa realized that the real confrontation was probably just beginning. Beverly wasn't the type to give up easily, and now she was angry and embarrassed. But Lisa also realized that she had something Beverly hadn't counted on, the respect and support of the law enforcement community that she'd spent years serving. And that was going to make all the difference in whatever came next. The fallout from Beverly's disastrous police call began almost immediately. By that evening, word had spread through the entire local law enforcement community about the HOA president who had tried to shut down one of their most valued training facilities by filing a false emergency report. Lisa spent the rest of that Tuesday fielding phone calls from officers, supervisors, and even police chiefs from neighboring counties who had heard about the incident. Captain Rodriguez from the city police department called personally to apologize for any inconvenience and to assure Lisa that her facility had the full support of his department. Anyone who wants to mess with your operation is going to have to go through us first, he told her. Your training has saved lives, and we're not going to let some power-hungry HOA president shut you down. The county sheriff was even more direct when he called. Lisa, if this woman causes you any more problems, you let me know immediately. What she did today was completely out of line, and we won't tolerate harassment of someone who provides essential services to law enforcement. But the most interesting call came from Patricia, the HOA secretary who phoned Lisa around 8 o'clock that evening. Lisa, I owe you an apology, Patricia said, her voice shaky. I never supported Beverly's campaign against your business, but I wasn't brave enough to stand up to her. After what happened today, I can't stay silent anymore. Patricia explained that she'd been documenting Beverly's increasingly erratic behavior for months, including the harassment campaign against Lisa. She'd been waiting for the right moment to bring her concerns to the other board members, but Beverly's false police report had forced her hand. I've called an emergency board meeting for tomorrow night, Patricia said. Beverly's actions today crossed every line, and the board needs to address this before she does something even worse. The emergency HOA meeting turned out to be quite different from Beverly's previous presentations. Instead of PowerPoint slides about property values, the board was dealing with legal liability issues and potential criminal charges against their president. Helen, the vice president, opened the meeting by reading a prepared statement distancing the board from Beverly's actions. The board did not authorize Mrs. Hartwell to file emergency police reports or to change the timeline for compliance from 72 hours to 30 minutes. Her actions were taken independently and do not represent the position of this board. Robert, the treasurer, was more blunt. Beverly, what you did yesterday could expose the HOA to serious legal liability. If Lisa decides to sue us for harassment, we could be looking at significant financial damages. Beverly tried to defend her actions, but she was clearly shaken by the criminal citation and the unified opposition from the law enforcement community. I was trying to protect our property values. This board gave me authority to resolve the violation issue. We gave you authority to work within legal boundaries, Patricia said firmly. Filing false police reports and making threats is not what we authorized. The meeting got more interesting when Tom Valdez showed up with a petition of his own. While Beverly had been focused on harassing Lisa, Tom had been quietly talking to neighbors about the real impact of the training facility on their community. His petition had signatures from 47 residents supporting Lisa's right to operate her business. The petition praised the facility for providing valuable community services and noted that crime rates in their area had actually decreased since more police departments started using Lisa's training programs. My son David has been volunteering at the facility, Tom told the board. He's learned more about law enforcement in 2 months than he ever could have from textbooks. Lisa is providing opportunities for our young people while making our entire community safer. Mrs. Rodriguez, whose house had been burglarized, spoke about how Lisa had helped coordinate with the responding officers and provided comfort during a traumatic experience. Having someone with Lisa's expertise and connections in our neighborhood is a blessing, not a problem. Even more damaging to Beverly's position was the attendance of several police officers at the meeting. Sergeant Torres showed up in uniform along with Detective Williams and Officer Chen. They didn't say much, but their presence sent a clear message about where the law enforcement community stood. When Beverly tried to argue that property values were still the primary concern, Detective Williams quietly stood up and addressed the board. I've been a police officer for 15 years, she said. I've seen training facilities across 3 states, and I can tell you that Lisa Mitchell runs one of the finest operations I've ever encountered. Any community would be lucky to have her. Officer Chen nodded in agreement. The K-9 program in our department has improved dramatically since we started training here. Dogs trained at this facility have found missing children, detected drugs in schools, and helped solve dozens of major cases. The board voted unanimously to censure Beverly and remove her from her position as president. They also voted to formally recognize Lisa's business as a beneficial community asset and to exempt her property from most HOA aesthetic regulations in appreciation for her service to public safety. Beverly stormed out of the meeting, but her troubles were just beginning. The criminal citation for filing a false police report was scheduled for court the following month. and Lisa's attorney had advised her that she had strong grounds for a harassment lawsuit against both Beverly personally and the HOA. More importantly, Beverly's real estate connections had heard about the incident. Word spread quickly through professional networks that she had tried to shut down a police training facility by filing false emergency reports. Several potential clients canceled projects, and her reputation in the community was severely damaged. Within 2 weeks, Beverly's house went up for sale. The for sale sign in her front yard was visible from Lisa's property, and Lisa had to admit she felt a certain satisfaction every time she saw it. The new HOA president was Helen, who immediately reached out to Lisa to repair the relationship between the association and the training facility. The board formally apologized for Beverly's actions and offered to help promote Lisa's business within the community. "We realize now that having your facility here is actually a selling point for the neighborhood," Helen told Lisa. "Prospective buyers love knowing that they'll be living near a facility that helps train the officers who protect their families." The most satisfying outcome came a month later when Beverly appeared in court to answer the misuse of emergency services charge. Lisa attended the hearing, along with Sergeant Torres and several other officers who had responded to the false call. The judge was not impressed with Beverly's explanation that she had been trying to protect property values. "Ma'am, emergency services exist to respond to actual emergencies, not to settle civil disputes between neighbors. Your actions diverted resources that could have been needed for real emergencies." Beverly was sentenced to community service, a fine, and was required to take a class on appropriate use of emergency services. She was also ordered to stay away from Lisa's property unless she had legitimate business there. But the real justice came in the form of community support that continued to grow around Lisa's facility. The incident had actually raised awareness of the valuable work she was doing, and several new police departments contacted her about training services. Officer Martinez brought his son by one afternoon to see the facility where his K-9 partner had learned his skills. "Dad talks about this place all the time," the 12-year-old told Lisa. "He says the training here helped Storm save a kid who was lost in the woods." David Valdez, who had been volunteering at the facility since the beginning of the controversy, announced that he wanted to pursue a career in law enforcement and asked Lisa to write him a recommendation letter for the police academy. The neighborhood itself began to embrace the facility in ways Beverly had never anticipated. Several residents started attending Lisa's monthly open houses, where she demonstrated training techniques and educated the community about police work. Mrs. Chen, who had initially been nervous about the police cars in the neighborhood, became one of Lisa's strongest supporters after her teenage daughter expressed interest in becoming a detective. Lisa arranged for the girl to do a ride-along with Detective Williams, sparking a passion for criminal justice. Property values in Meadowbrook Estates actually increased over the following year, partly due to the unique amenity of having a respected police training facility in the community. Real estate agents started marketing homes in the development by mentioning the enhanced security and the interesting educational opportunities available to residents. The training facility expanded its community outreach programs, offering citizen police academies and safety workshops for residents. Lisa partnered with the local school district to provide educational programs about law enforcement careers and public safety. 6 months after Beverly's departure, the Meadowbrook Estates HOA presented Lisa with a Community Service Award at their annual meeting. The presentation was attended by police officers from 4 different departments, along with dozens of residents who had come to appreciate having the facility in their neighborhood. Lisa stood in front of the same community room where Beverly had once tried to drum up support for shutting down her business, looking out at faces that were now friendly and supportive. "When I first started getting HOA violation notices," Lisa told the audience, "I wondered if I was going to have to choose between my home and my life's work. I'm grateful that this community ultimately chose to embrace what we do here, rather than fear it." Captain Rodriguez, who had driven over for the ceremony, presented Lisa with a plaque from the Regional Law Enforcement Association, recognizing her contributions to officer safety and training excellence. "Sergeant Mitchell's facility has trained over 300 officers in the past 5 years," he told the audience. "Those officers go on to serve communities across the region, making all of us safer." Any community that has her is blessed. As Lisa drove home that night, she passed the empty lot where Beverly's mansion had once stood. The new owners were a young couple with 2 small children who had specifically chosen the neighborhood because of its reputation for safety and community involvement. The irony wasn't lost on Lisa that Beverly's attempt to drive her away had actually strengthened her ties to the community and expanded her business. The harassment campaign that was supposed to protect property values had ultimately enhanced them by highlighting the unique benefits of having a police training facility nearby. Lisa pulled into her driveway and looked around at the property that had been in her family for 3 generations. The training equipment that Beverly had called an eyesore was now viewed as a community asset. The police vehicles that had supposedly lowered property values were now seen as symbols of security and public service. The ranch was busier than ever, with training sessions booked months in advance and a waiting list of departments wanting to send officers for specialized courses. Lisa had even hired 2 part-time assistants to help manage the increased demand. But the most rewarding change was the relationship with her neighbors. Instead of violation notices and threats, her mailbox now contained thank you cards from residents, invitations to community events, and occasional cookies from Mrs. Rodriguez. Beverly had set out to destroy Lisa's business and force her to leave the community. Instead, she had inadvertently created the strongest possible foundation for both. Sometimes, Lisa reflected, the best way to defeat a bully is simply to keep doing excellent work and let the community see the truth for themselves. The ranch was thriving, the neighborhood was safer, and the training facility was making a difference in communities across the region. And somewhere else, in whatever new community she had moved to, Beverly was hopefully learning that sometimes the things we try to destroy end up stronger than ever.